The morning of her sister's graduation party, Daphne Wren stood in the kitchen of the house she was paying for and watched a stranger rearrange her refrigerator. The stranger was Colt Reeves, Petra's boyfriend of 14 months, a man who had opinions about everything and responsibility for nothing. He was pulling out Daphne's good wine, the bottle she'd been saving since their mother's last birthday, and setting it on the counter like it was already his. "That's not for tonight," Daphne said. Colt glanced at her the way people glance at parking meters. Mildly inconvenient, easily ignored. Petra said it was fine. Daphne looked at the bottle. A 2019 Napa cab she'd bought the day her firm made her a senior architect. She put it back in the refrigerator without another word. That should have been the moment she understood what kind of night it was going to be. She had bought the house 3 years before, when Petra was 22, and freshly dropped out of her first attempt at nursing school. Their father had died the previous spring, quietly, in the way that men who spent their whole lives being quiet tend to die. And their mother had followed 8 months later, a stroke that came without warning on a Tuesday in November. After the funerals, after the estate was settled, there wasn't much. A small savings account, the car, a storage unit full of furniture that neither of them knew what to do with. Daphne was 34. She had a job she'd worked 15 years to get to. She had an apartment in Midtown and a 401k and exactly zero intention of letting her little sister become another statistic about young women who lose both parents before 25 and never recover. So she made a decision. She bought a house in Decatur, 12 minutes from her office, 2 bedrooms, good neighborhood, good schools nearby for whenever that mattered. She put Petra's name on the utility accounts to help her build credit. She paid the mortgage herself every month on time, without complaint for 3 years. She also paid for Petra's second attempt at nursing school and her textbooks and her scrubs and the gas to get there and back. She didn't think of it as sacrifice. She thought of it as math. Petra was her only family. Family was what you held on to. What she didn't account for was Colt. Colt Reeves came into Petra's life the way certain kinds of men do, through a mutual friend, with a lot of energy and an easy smile and the particular confidence of someone who has never had to work very hard for anything. He had a vague job in sales that he described differently every time someone asked. He drove a truck that was too new to be paid off. He called Daphne the landlord when he thought she couldn't hear him. Petra thought he was the most interesting person she'd ever met. Daphne tried. She genuinely tried. She had them both over for dinner twice. She asked Colt questions about himself and listened to the answers. She told Petra privately that she just wanted her to be happy, which was true, and that she had a good feeling about him, which was not. What she actually had was a feeling like a splinter, small nagging, too deep to get out cleanly. Colt didn't like that the house was Daphne's. That was the thing she eventually understood. He didn't say it outright, but it lived in every comment he made, about how the place needed new fixtures, about how Petra should have more say in the decorating, about how it was weird for a woman in her 20s to still be living in her sister's house. "It's not her sister's house," Petra had apparently told him more than once. "It's our house." Daphne found that out later secondhand. At the time she had no idea what was being said about her in her own kitchen. The graduation party was Daphne's idea. Petra had finally passed her boards, third time which neither of them ever mentioned, and started a position at Northside Hospital. Daphne had been so proud she'd cried in her car on the way home from the phone call. Not sad crying. The other kind, where your chest fills up with something too large for the space it's been given. She planned everything herself. She booked the caterer. She ordered the cake from that bakery in Virginia Highland that did the layered lemon one Petra had loved since childhood. She put together a playlist, strung lights on the back porch, sent invitations to Petra's nursing school friends and a few people from the hospital. She spent 2 Saturdays doing it. The morning of the party she drove over early to get things set up. That was when she found Colt rearranging the refrigerator. She put the wine back. She started setting out the serving dishes. She was arranging the charcuterie board when Petra came downstairs in a robe, her hair still wrapped in a towel, looking like she'd forgotten the party was happening today. "Oh good, you're here," Petra said. "Not thank you. Not this looks amazing. Just you're here." "I brought the extra folding chairs," Daphne said. "They're in my trunk, Colt can get them later." Petra poured herself coffee. "Hey, can you maybe not put the food on the island? We were thinking the table outside would be better." Daphne picked up the charcuterie board she'd just set down and moved it without saying anything. By noon Colt had invited 6 of his friends she'd never heard of. By 1, someone had opened the good wine. The party started at 3. By 4:30 the back porch was full, and Daphne was refilling the chip bowl for the 3rd time when she overheard a conversation she was not supposed to hear. She was standing just inside the sliding glass door. Petra and 2 of her nursing school friends were at the far corner of the porch, and the music wasn't quite loud enough to cover what Petra was saying. She kind of just shows up and takes over, Petra was saying. Like, she means well, but it's a lot. She doesn't really ask what I want, she just decides. One of the friends said something sympathetic. Colt says it's a control thing, Petra continued. Like she uses the house and the money to stay involved in my life. And honestly, the more I think about it, the more I think he's right. Daphne stood very still with the chip bowl in her hands. She had a strange thought in that moment. This is what the inside of a breaking thing feels like. Not a snap, not a crash, just a slow, even crack, spreading quiet across the whole structure. She went back inside. She set the bowl on the counter. She stood at the kitchen sink and looked out the window at the yard and breathed. Then she picked up her phone and called her real estate attorney. Not then, exactly. But within the hour. She didn't make a scene. This was important to her afterward and she held on to it. She did not cry at the party. She did not confront Petra. She refilled the chip bowl. She smiled at people she'd never met. She cut the cake herself because the caterer's assistant didn't know how to angle the knife correctly for layered cake, and it mattered to her that the layers showed. She left at 7, said she had an early morning. Petra hugged her at the door, briefly, distracted, already turning back toward the party, and said thanks for doing all this. Just like that, thanks for doing all this. Like Daphne had picked up the dry cleaning. She sat in her car for a few minutes in the dark. Then she drove home, took a shower and spent 2 hours on her laptop going over documents she hadn't looked at since closing day. The house was in her name alone. She had been careful about that, even back when things were simpler, because she was the kind of person who read everything before she signed it. Petra's name was on the utilities, that was it. Daphne opened a new email to her attorney. She didn't act immediately. This is the part she wanted to be clear about if anyone ever asked. She did not make a rash decision. She sat with what she'd heard for 3 weeks. She went to work, she came home. She ate dinner alone. She called her friend Theodora twice and talked around the edges of what was happening without saying it directly, because saying it directly would make it real, in a way she wasn't ready for. She kept thinking about her mother. Her mother had been the kind of woman who held things together through sheer force of not complaining. She worked a full shift as a medical billing specialist, and came home and made dinner and helped with homework, and never once said I'm tired or I need something or, someone please see what I'm doing here. She just did it, and they loved her. They loved her dearly, but neither of them, not Daphne, not Petra, not their father, ever really understood what it cost her until she was gone and there was no one left to hold the things together. Daphne had spent her whole adult life trying not to be that woman. The invisible one. The one who gives everything and gets thanked the way you thank a vending machine. She understood, sitting with this for 3 weeks, that she had become her anyway. At the end of the 3rd week, she called Petra and asked if she could come over on Saturday morning to talk. Petra said sure, and asked if she could bring coffee. Daphne brought coffee, she also brought a folder. She found Petra alone. Colt was at a friend's place apparently, which Daphne thought might be the only decent thing he'd ever done for her. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table Daphne had bought at a second-hand furniture store in Avondale. Because Petra had said she liked the distressed wood, she put the coffees down. She put the folder on the table. I need to talk to you about the house, she said. Petra looked at the folder. Something shifted in her face. Not quite worry, more like the expression people get when they've been anticipating a conversation and are now realizing it's actually happening. Okay, she said carefully. Daphne didn't dress it up. She had decided beforehand that she wasn't going to dress it up, because dressing it up was the thing she always did. The softening, the making it easier for everyone else. And she was done with that. I heard what you said to Amber and Gretchen at the party, she said. About me using the house to control you. About what Colt thinks. Petra's face went through several things very quickly. Daphne, I'm not here to fight about it, Daphne said. I want you to know that, I'm not angry, I'm just done. Done with what? With this arrangement. She opened the folder and slid a paper across the table. That's a 60-day notice, I'm selling the house. The silence that followed was so complete that Daphne could hear the refrigerator hum. The very same refrigerator Colt had rearranged 2 months ago. The one she'd bought, like everything else in this kitchen, like the table under their coffee cups, like the light fixture overhead that Petra had once said she loved. You can't, Petra started. I can, Daphne said, not unkindly. It's my house, Petra. It's always been my house. I've been paying the mortgage for 3 years. Your name isn't on the deed. Where am I supposed to go? Daphne had asked herself that question many times in the past 3 weeks. It had been the hardest part, not the legal part. The legal part was simple, clean, entirely hers to execute. The hard part was this: she loved her sister. Even now, sitting at this table with a folder between them, she loved her. And love doesn't stop just because someone has let you down badly enough to change the shape of things. You have a job now, Daphne said. A real one. You're a nurse at a good hospital. You can afford an apartment. She paused. Colt has a place, doesn't he? The look on Petra's face at that, a flicker of something that might have been shame, told Daphne everything she needed to know about how seriously Petra had thought through what Colt's opinions were actually costing her. I'll give you 60 days, Daphne said. That's more than the law requires. I'll also pay the movers. She stood up. She picked up her coffee. Daphne, Petra's voice cracked. Please, I didn't mean it. What I said at the party, I was just venting. I didn't actually think. You've been thinking it for a while, Daphne said, not harshly. Just honestly, I could tell, and maybe some of it is even true. Maybe I did hold on too tight. But there's a difference between your sister being overprotective and your sister being a control freak who uses money to manipulate you. And you let your boyfriend put that idea in your head, and you said it out loud at a party I organized in your honor. She looked at Petra for a long moment. I need some distance. The house is one way to get it. She walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the frame. The lemon cake is still in the freezer, she said. Second shelf. You should take it before you go. She listed the house 6 weeks later, priced it right because she wasn't interested in games, and had an offer in 11 days. The buyers were a young couple, early 30s, recently married. The wife was an elementary school teacher. They wanted to repaint the kitchen yellow. Daphne signed the documents in her attorney's office on a Tuesday afternoon and drove directly to a late lunch at her favorite restaurant on Ponce, where she sat alone at a corner table and ordered the roasted chick and a glass of wine. The same Napa cab she'd never gotten to drink, and ate slowly, without looking at her phone. She'd expected to feel emptier than this. She'd been bracing for it, the hollow feeling she associated with irreversible decisions, but what she actually felt was closer to something she didn't have a word for. Not happy exactly, not relieved. Something more like solid, like ground under her feet that wasn't going anywhere. She thought about her mother, the way she always did when something large happened. She thought, I did not disappear this time. Petra called 4 times in the 2 weeks after the listing went up. 3 of the calls Daphne let go to voicemail. The 4th she answered. I just want to understand, Petra said. She sounded like she'd been crying. Why you couldn't talk to me? Why you just went straight to selling everything? I did talk to you, Daphne said. At the table. With the folder before that. Why didn't you say something before? Daphne thought about this. It was a fair question and Petra deserved a fair answer. Because I kept thinking it would get better, she said. And then I heard you at the party and I understood that it wasn't going to. Some things you can feel coming and you still have to actually feel them before you move. There was a long silence. Colt and I broke up, Petra said quietly. Daphne had expected that too. She wasn't sure how she felt about it. It wasn't a victory, it didn't change anything, and she refused to let herself feel responsible for it in either direction. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it, mostly. Are you really selling it? It's already sold. Another silence. I'm trying to understand, Petra said again. I keep trying. I know, Daphne said. I think that's the right thing to do. I think understanding what happened here is the most important thing you can do right now. She paused. I love you. I want you to know that hasn't changed. But I needed this. I needed to do something that was just mine. She heard Petra exhale. Can I call you? Asked in a while. When things settle, Daphne said. You can always call me. The new apartment was on the 9th floor, which was something she'd always wanted, and never let herself have because the houses she'd considered, and the budget she'd always shaped around someone else's needs, hadn't left room for 9th floor views. It was smaller than the Decatur house. 1 bedroom, an open kitchen, a balcony just wide enough for 2 chairs and a small table. She put the chairs out the day she moved in. She sat in one of them that evening with a glass of wine and looked at the city below her. The lights coming on in the dusk, the skyline she'd spent 15 years working in without ever quite looking at from above. And she thought about the 10 years since she'd started in this field. The drafting tables and the late nights and the first time she'd seen a building she'd designed actually standing in the world. Solid and real. She thought about her mother again. She thought about how the story of women who give and give and give usually ends, the long quiet erasure of them. The way history tends to remember the things that got built and forget the hands that held everything steady while they were being built. She thought, not this one. A neighbor she hadn't met yet came out onto the adjacent balcony. A woman around her age, glasses, a book tucked under one arm. She glanced over, noticed Daphne and lifted her chin in the easy acknowledgement of strangers sharing proximity. Daphne raised her glass slightly. The woman smiled and opened her book. Below them, the city went on doing what cities do, loud and luminous and indifferent to anyone's private reckoning. And Daphne sat in her chair on the 9th floor and for the first time in as long as she could remember, had nowhere she needed to be and no one she needed to hold together. It felt, she thought, exactly like being free.